Just hours after Venezuela announced expanded air defense alerts along its northern coast, a US B-2 Spirit was already moving. At 4:11 local time, the Ghost bomber crossed into the Caribbean night at nearly 600 miles per hour, flying dark, silent, and alone. No radio traffic, no visible lights. On most radar screens, it wasn't there at all. This aircraft does not patrol. It appears only when the message matters. Below, Venezuelan operators noticed something strange. A faint return appeared, then vanished, then showed up again, closer than before. The system refreshed. The distance dropped fast. Less than 6 minutes separated uncertainty from direct confrontation. Instead of staying quiet, air defense crews shifted their sensors toward the approach path. It was a dangerous choice. Not a lock, not a retreat, a signal that they were watching. Inside US command channels, no one raised their voice. They didn't have to. Procedures were already running. Every mile the bomber covered reduced the number of options on both sides. This was not a navigation issue. It was not a warning flight. It was a deliberate presence, placed exactly where Venezuela said it would respond. Caracas believed it was testing limits. What it didn't realize was that the Ghost bomber had already entered the space where decisions are no longer debated. Stay with us. The next minutes will decide how far this confrontation goes. What happened over the Caribbean was not about one aircraft, and it was not about one night. This stretch of airspace off Venezuela's northern coast has become one of the most sensitive pressure points in the region. US patrol routes, surveillance flights, and naval movements pass through here constantly. Every radar is active, every shift is watching. Nothing moves by accident. For Venezuela, this zone is symbolic. It is the closest place where they can claim resistance without firing a shot. By signaling attention to a Ghost bomber, Caracas was trying to show control, not strength. The message was simple. We see you, and we are willing to stare back. But this kind of signaling only works if the other side hesitates. For the US crews involved, hesitation is not part of the equation. To the pilot inside that B-2, this was not politics. It was distance, speed, fuel, and timing. Every mile flown forward meant fewer options behind. Every second mattered. Training takes over in moments like this because thinking too much gets people killed. Down on the ground, Venezuelan operators faced a different reality. Tracking something you can barely see forces hard choices. Stay silent and look weak. React and risk exposure. In that gap between those options is where mistakes happen. This is why moments like this matter. They set patterns. They teach both sides what works and what fails. One misread move here does not stay local. It shapes the next encounter, the next flight, the next response. If you think Venezuela was testing its limits and went too far, press 1. If you think the US presence itself is the real provocation, press 9. And make sure you're subscribed, because the next response happens fast. The first response didn't start with a missile. It started with a screen. Inside a US airborne command aircraft, a radar operator watched a faint mark tighten into a solid track. The color shifted. That change meant the system now believed there was a real aircraft on the other end. Not weather, not noise, something moving with intent. At 4:19 local time, the distance between the Ghost bomber and Venezuela's monitoring zone dropped under 90 miles. At that range, timing matters more than politics. The operator called it out, steady and calm. No shouting, no drama. Just facts moving fast. In the cockpit of the B-2, the pilot did not look down. He already knew. The aircraft stayed level, speed constant, heading unchanged. Any sharp move would leave a trace. Any hesitation would invite questions. The bomber kept going, silent and clean. Below, Venezuelan air defense crews reacted almost at the same moment. Sensors were adjusted, angles narrowed, power levels shifted slightly higher. Not enough to lock, just enough to watch. It was the kind of move that feels safe until it isn't. Inside US command channels, procedures rolled forward. Escort fighters were already airborne farther back, holding position outside detection range. Electronic systems began mapping the airspace in real time, not by emitting signals, but by listening. Every radar pulse from the ground painted a clearer picture. At 4:22, the gap shrank again. 70 miles. Then 65. At this point, there was no room for misunderstanding. Every person involved knew the same truth. If someone made the wrong choice in the next few minutes, it would not stay quiet. No shots were fired, not yet. But the first move had already been made. Detection had turned into confirmation. Confirmation was sliding toward commitment. If you believe this was the moment Venezuela should have backed off, press 1. If you think the US should never have pushed this far forward, press 9 and stay with us, because the next phase begins right now. Escalation does not always come with noise. Most of the time, it arrives quietly, while everyone pretends nothing has changed. At 4:24 local time, the airspace between the Ghost bomber and Venezuela's northern coast felt empty. No radio warnings, no challenge calls, just dark sky above and black ocean below. But inside both command centers, the pressure was climbing fast. For the US crew, the danger was not panic, it was overload. Long missions stretch attention thin. Systems run hot. Every sensor feeds data non-stop, and the human brain can only sort so much at once. That is why control matters more than speed in moments like this. You slow your mind even when the aircraft does not slow down. The B-2 held its course, speed steady, altitude unchanged. In close encounters, even small movements can be misread. A 5-degree turn can look aggressive. A slight climb can trigger alarms. So the bomber stayed perfectly stable, forcing the other side to make the next move. On the ground, Venezuelan air defense crews faced a harder problem. Their screens showed broken tracks, contacts that faded, then returned closer. Radar operators leaned forward, adjusting angles, trying to sharpen the picture. More power would help, but more power also meant being seen. Every adjustment carried risk. For nearly a full minute, nothing happened. No sound except low voices reading out ranges, no alarms. Outside, the ocean reflected nothing. No ships, no lights, just open water and silence. Then electronic activity shifted. Not jamming, not interference, just listening. Passive systems began building a clearer map of the airspace. In modern combat, hearing the other side often matters more than seeing them. Every pulse from the ground revealed a little more. By 4:27, both sides were fully engaged without firing a single shot. Radar crews, pilots, commanders, all locked into the same moment. The distance between them had become a test of discipline. One side depended on visibility. The other depended on staying invisible. This is how escalation really works. Not with explosions, but with pressure. With choices made under stress. With the understanding that backing down now feels worse than pushing forward. If you believe Venezuela pushed this situation too far, press 1. If you think the US escalation itself created the danger, press 9 and stay with us, because the next move will not be quiet. What neither side realized at first was that the situation they were reacting to was not the full picture. At 4:29 local time, a second signal quietly entered the scene. It didn't come from the Ghost bomber. It didn't come from Venezuela's coast either. It came from much lower, closer to the surface, riding just above the ocean where radar coverage thins. On Venezuelan screens, it looked like background noise, a weak return mixed into sea clutter, something easy to ignore when all attention is locked on a high-altitude threat. Operators stayed focused on the bomber, adjusting systems to track what they believed was the main danger. But inside US command channels, the picture looked very different. Passive sensors had already separated the signals. One track was deliberate and steady. The other was quiet, low, and moving into position without drawing attention. No one announced it. No alarm sounded. A single confirmation passed through the system in plain language. Secondary contact confirmed. No change to primary tasking. This was the twist. The Ghost bomber was not alone in shaping the encounter. It was pulling focus, forcing eyes upward and forward, while another element moved where no one was looking. Not to strike, not yet. Just to be in the right place if the situation turned. On the ground, Venezuelan crews felt growing pressure without understanding why. Their displays didn't make sense. Too many gaps, too many uncertainties. They knew something was wrong, but not what. In moments like this, confusion is more dangerous than fear. Decisions slow, confidence fades, and every second without clarity shifts the balance. If you think Venezuela missed the real move happening right in front of them, press 1. If you believe the US was pushing deception too far, press 9, because what comes next happens before anyone can reset. The climax did not arrive with an explosion, it arrived with a pause. At 4:33 local time, the Caribbean went completely still. Inside the B-2 cockpit, the pilot felt the aircraft respond to tiny inputs, smooth and automatic. The Ghost bomber was exactly where it needed to be. No evasive moves, no warnings, just forward motion. Below, Venezuelan air defense crews reached the edge of uncertainty. Contacts overlapped. Some returns faded while others appeared closer than expected. Systems disagreed. Operators checked each other's screens, then checked them again. This was the moment everyone trains for, and hopes never comes. A short radio call broke the silence inside US command channels. Maintain course. That was all. No debate. No second guessing. At the same time, the secondary element reached its position. Still unseen, still unchallenged. From this angle, any aggressive move from the ground would trigger an immediate response. Everyone on both sides understood that now. For a few seconds, no one spoke. On Venezuelan consoles, hands hovered above controls. Locking on meant exposure. Staying quiet meant losing control of the situation. Either choice carried consequences that could not be undone. In moments like this, time stretches. 10 seconds feels like a minute. Every breath sounds loud. Every small sound feels amplified. The ocean below remained calm, unaware that decisions above it could change everything. Then it ended. Not with fire, but with restraint. Venezuelan systems eased back, power levels dropped, focus shifted away from the approach corridor. The threat did not disappear, but it stopped advancing. Inside the B-2, nothing changed. The bomber continued forward, unchallenged, untouched, exactly as designed. The message had already been delivered. This was the peak, the point where a single move could have sparked something far bigger. It did not happen because one side blinked and the other never needed to. If you think Venezuela made the right call by backing down at the last second, press 1. If you believe the US pushed this moment right to the edge on purpose, press 9. Because what follows matters just as much as what didn't happen. When the tension finally eased, nothing looked different from the outside. The sky stayed dark, the ocean stayed calm. No smoke, no wreckage. But everyone involved knew the situation had changed. The Ghost bomber continued on its route, unchallenged, untouched. Venezuelan air defense systems returned to normal monitoring. No missiles were fired, no aircraft were lost. On paper, it looked like nothing happened. In reality, both sides had just learned something important. For Venezuela, the lesson was clear. Seeing an aircraft does not mean controlling it. Watching is not the same as stopping. Their systems worked, but only up to a point. Beyond that point, choices became limited, and hesitation carried real risk. For the US, the message was just as sharp. Presence still matters. Silence can be louder than force. A single aircraft flown the right way can shape decisions without firing a shot. This is how modern pressure works. Not through destruction, but through positioning. Inside command rooms, reports were written carefully, timelines were reviewed, every second of the encounter was replayed. These moments don't end when aircraft turn away. They feed planning, posture, and the next move. Because this was not an isolated event, it was a test, a rehearsal, a signal sent in both directions. The next encounter may not involve restraint on both sides, it may not end quietly, and it may not give either side the same amount of time to decide. What happened over the Caribbean will echo forward, in future flights, in future alerts, in future decisions made under pressure. If you think this standoff proves deterrence still works, press 1. If you believe it shows how close both sides came to something worse, press 9 and stay subscribed. Because this story is not over. The next test may come without warning. What matters now is what happens next. Flights will continue. Alerts will be faster. Decisions will be made with less room for doubt. Both sides walked away this time, but the memory of that night will stay. And in future encounters, memory often shapes action more than intention. One thing is certain, the line was tested and now everyone knows exactly where it is.